Welcome to a dialogue with Pastor Nzo, where we talk to men. We want to get into a man's mind, a man's heart. As it's been said, that it's more harder to bring men around to talk about issues of concern to them, things that affect them psychologically, emotionally, and affects them in their minds. Today, that's what we're going to enjoy. Get ready, sit tight on your chair, because we're going to hear men talking to us, asking questions that are personal relevance to them, and among professionals, among married and unmarried men who are in our team today, just to talk about things that pertain to men. Stay put and tell other men to join in Jesus' name.
Change Bible Church.
Let's hear from the men, both married and unmarried. Inkulumo, to the talk about men and two men, about what goes on in their minds. We want to hear from them. For me, it's an honor to get the men to talk. Wow, praise the Lord. Sanbonani, good morning. Are you well? Maybe let's find out what's in your mind, men. What are kind of things that men talk about? I want to hear maybe from you guys and raising up matters that are very important to us about what men are constantly talking about, what's bothering men, what's in their mind, what needs to be solved, what needs a pastoral input, what needs direction, what needs love, support, and care.
Well, thanks very much for the opportunity to sit down with you and have a talk as men. We highly appreciate this opportunity. Maybe when we talk about men, the first thing that I want us to look at is men. What is a man? Because the society, the community, families, different groups of people define men in different ways. What I want to find out from you, Fundisi, is what is the biblical definition of a man?
The biblical definition of a man, that's very interesting that you asked me that, is that it can be found way back when you go to the book of beginnings, the book of Genesis, where God created Adam. The word Adam falls into three categories. The first one is that Adam, which means created from the earth. Adama, in Hebrew, it's Adama, from the earth. Number two is the one that carries responsibility. Remember the first man that God created, he said, till the ground, look after the ground, name the animals. So he's the one who's able to protect the environment. Number three, the man is out of whom the woman was pulled out. So the woman was pulled out of the man. No wonder that when they saw the woman, they said, this is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. So number three, the three things that are critical is number one, man represents God's creation. That's a relationship with God. There's a relational part, nunkulunku. And it's very sad that these days, that part of man to relate with God has been closely shut down. And we have transferred the responsibility to women. We said, let the women go to church. Let the women do what? But the first man, Adam, God was visiting daily before the woman was created. So number one is a relational aspect created by God. Number two is the one who carries responsibility. And number three is the one out of whom life was given to a woman. So a man is someone who knows God, who works for family, who applies his mind to work, to whom work is at the center of his life. And number three, out of which that which provides for life is made available, because Adam and Eve came out of the man. So basically that would be a basic definition of a man from the Bible. Relationship with God, relationship with work, and relationship with supply and provision and care and protection and everything that a man should do. That's my basic definition of relationship with a man. But also, I know that in your job, you're a social worker, right? As a social worker, you must be meeting a lot of cases that involve men. What are some of the other questions, other things, maybe the top of the list, the top 3, 4, 5 things that you have found to be problematic about men? Maybe you can share.
Currently, one of the challenges is that, when you look at, at the definition of men, like I've said that, culture, communities, society has got, different definitions of what a man is.
Yeah.
You find that, men are struggling, these days, to understand exactly who we are as men, because, now, we talk about transgenders, people, will tell you that, I'm a man, as in when I feel like being a man. If today I feel like being a woman, I'm a woman. So that, in a way, it sort of, helps people to shift away from responsibilities. Hence, I was saying that, let us go back to what is the biblical definition of, what a man is? Because, there are quite a number of challenges that, men are faced with. One of the definitions that, I've realized, with men is that, it's attached to responsibility. So sometimes, men are defined, with regard to their responsibilities that they have, within the family, within the society, or in a culture of some sort. So these are some of the complicated issues with regard to a man. Hence, I said, let's go back to what is the biblical definition of a man?
Yeah, and I think before we move to other questions, just the three basic aspects of a definition of a man that I gave. A relational aspect. The relational aspect with God, number one, caters for the development of a man, for a man to come to the full potential of who he is, his gifting, his potential. Only God is able to develop a man to come to the full potential in the right direction, to develop the right gifts. The second thing is that you pointed about responsibility. Let's face it, society will never let up to impose that on a man. Remember, when a man has a child with a woman, they say it's the man's child. Ubabake ubani, it's a man's child. So therefore, if they say it's a man's child, therefore that's culturally now, and that means the man needs to supply everything the child needs. And number three, out of whom the man makes the life, things come up that makes the life, like she gave life. So the man is always been seen as a provider, someone who needs to provide. And therefore, the question maybe that we need to ask ourselves, are we doing enough to prepare men at an early age to understand their role in society and to warm up to the idea of being responsible? So they provide, they do what needs to be done without compromising their own personal development. And I thank you for that. Is there another question maybe you want to talk about, maybe observation from your professional status?
Yeah, no, not necessarily from my professional status from this, but then since you mentioned the fact that man has to have some responsibilities and work, I think I've been very much interested in finding out what are some of the practical roles of men in a church situation, because personally I've observed that in most churches you find that there are so many men, but then they hide or shy away from participating in church activities. Maybe one of the reasons could be the fact that they do not know what should be their practical roles in church. So maybe let us bring it home and say, what is the role of a man in church before we even go to the society?
Okay. And I'm glad that you're asking that, the role of men in church. And I think when you talk about a role, let's separate a position and a role someone can play. You don't have to hold a position to have a role. Okay. And that, I'll tell you how that works. A role of a man in church, number one, is to support everything that goes on in church. Because remember, we come from a perspective of understanding that the man is the head of the family, particularly married men. And that doesn't mean stereotypical suppressing the wife, but that means leadership. So men need to be trained in leadership. So a man needs to bring himself into a place where leadership and matters of leading are taking place. So he needs to participate. And part of leadership, according to Jesus, starts by following. It doesn't start by leading. Jesus told his 12 disciples, follow me and I'll make you leaders and fishers of men. He says, Jesus is then giving us the picture that great leaders come from great following. So the role of a man in church is to support. There should never in church be a youth service where men don't come to protect, make sure their girls and their daughters are well looked after, or drive their daughters to church. There should never be anything that happens to church where men don't come to help, to make sure security is right, and particularly in urban areas, in suburban areas, where churches are placed in a locality where maybe 2 blocks down the line or 3 blocks down the line, there's a reputation of crime. Men should be there to show that, to say, in this house, when the acts of God, the work of God is continuing, we are out there making sure we're providing security. Men should be there to father and to pick up the young boys who don't have parents. There are a lot of young boys who are just raised by a mother. They're fatherless. So the man should be there to speak into this, particularly when they come to the age of 12 and age of 17 and age of 19, where the formative stages of a young man are greatly under scrutiny, under focus. So that we are there, we hold the talks that are about men. How do you talk about a man, a young guy, when he says, I'm feeling something for a girl, I feel like I like this girl. How to go about it, how to make sure we address matters like that. how to make sure we help this guy to plan, not only plan his future, but to plan how to tackle his year in particular grades at school. We need to make sure we have practical workshops. Part of the role of the man is, because somebody said, men are more practical, men are more thoughtful. I think we would need to stop not only having only spiritual services, only maybe last kulega corner we pray only, but we also have practical talks, the how to do it, to show the young boys how to do it, to make sure we come to church, make sure the church building is in order when the church services are there. So the man's role is to support, to make sure the work of God is supported, provide leadership, provide support, and provide everything that needs to be provided.
Mfundisi ngicela ukubuza la something. Mhlambe ngizokwenza example nje ngesilwane abasibiza inkukhu chicken. I-chicken usually ayifly iyasihambela nje. Kodwa uma beyixosha iqinisa indiza. So abayifuyile mabefuna ukuyibamba ba end up bayinikeza umbila. Bayibona umbila yona icabanga ukuthi izinto sihamba kahle kanti bafuna ukuyibamba. So i-question yami la kwi-unemployment. Umsebenzi ayisekho. But ikhona lapho kunemsebenzi only to find ukuthi i-trap ifana nombila. Sibona kanjani ukuthi le opportunity le ivela kuNkulunkulu or ivela kudevil, because esikhathini esiningi kunabantu abapowerful entweni zikaNkulunkulu bengasebenzi or bengafundi. Usathane bakhiphe nge-opportunity yomsebenzi. From there akasekho entweni zikaNkulunkulu, usebusy ngomsebenzi. From there akasekho entweni zikaNkulunkulu, ubusy ngokufunda. So i-question yami ithi uNkulunkulu uyasivumela yini ukuthi singayeka umsebenzi wakhe, mhlambe ukuhamba sifisha abantu sibashumayeza, sibadonsele enkosini, sibeke phansi lo msebenzi, sizame ukuvala izinto ze-unemployment ngoke emafemini?
You see, the issue of unemployment is that, number one, in South Africa, we have a problem with the high rate of unemployment. And I say it's not going to be a problem that's going to be solved overnight. So the unemployment picture is going to continue probably for the next 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, depending on the rates and depending how the economy improves. So therefore, it's something that's going to be around us. So therefore, if in unemployment is something that's going to be around us for the longest time, we must be intentional in how we solve it. So in other words, we're not going to solve unemployment just by being shallow. We need to have strategies, well thought out strategies on how to solve employment. Number one is that we as men, we need to, because solving unemployment includes changing your entire life. Even if we don't have employment, but we can start a small business. Business doesn't mean you need to have a big business like big companies. You can start small. You can start by selling tomatoes. You can start by selling apples. You can start by selling things that at the end of the day give you money, you support your family, but you learn business skills. So let's start there. And I think what has happened for many people is that there's been a culture of entitlement. People feeling because we were there when we were fighting for independence, our emancipation of the people. We were there when we were making sure that apartheid is gone. Therefore, everything must come to us. No, nothing is going to come to us. As a matter of fact, the mind that things are going to come to you, you need to shatter that. You need to put it aside. Number one, we need to get together as groups. One, every man can start a business. You can start small, okay? And the business will grow. As long as you're good at it, apply your mind to it, it will grow. Number two, we need to get together. Churches, formal organizations like churches, need to make sure that we invest our resources in things that are going to bring men together to provide a form of breakthrough and relief and work. So in other words, we start maybe an NGO, or we start a business idea initiative and make sure the men get involved so that they can get work and earn some income and make sure they look after families. I would rather take home 300 rand a day and feed the family than sit at home and do nothing and say, what's the worth of 300 rand? 300 rand times 5, it's 1,500. 1,500 times 4, that's a week, times 4 is 6,000. 6,000 times 12, that's 72,000 a year. Just for a start. It's better than sitting down and letting the family to be down by 72,000. but the family now is up by 72,000 because you may be bringing in your contribution. It may not sound big, but it's getting the family somewhere. Now that you have learned how to bring in 300 rand, next year you learn how to bring in 600 rand. The next year you learn how to bring in 1,200. Now your income is doubling, 144,000, 288,000 next year, and all because you started somewhere. I think what we need to inculcate the mind in the minds of men is to say employment is not going to be solved for everybody tomorrow and next year. It's going to take 5-6 years. What are we doing in between? We need to get up and work and do something with our hands. Get together, find people of like minds and do something about employment. Sell something, provide your services to someone, do something you can never done. Provide a service of polishing people's shoes. It doesn't matter that you polish people's shoes. Let people laugh at that. What I've noticed is that people are afraid of being laughed at the expense of letting their families go down. We need to make sure that we work harder. But let me come to the ministry part. Even us as preachers, people are looking at us. Sometimes we do not set the right example as we should. I tell other preachers that when the church is small, find a job. Because if you're always taking income from the church, how's the church going to build? How's the church going to buy a keyboard? How's the church is going to buy chairs if you always are taking the money? If you're working and give the chance, a church a chance. That's what I did when I started our church. For the first 6, 7, 8 years, I worked. Yeah, I was an executive director. I had to work. So the church can accumulate money so that we can start to buy our first piece of land, bought our first tent, bought our first, 1,000 chairs, bought what? So the church can accumulate assets. So in the ministry, yes, we should not stop preaching, but we can help the church. That's what the Apostle Paul says. He says to different churches, many churches. He says, like in Thessalonica, he says, you know how night and day I worked with my hands while I looked after the church. He was a tent maker. He never stopped making tents. The income, that's what he paid for, while the other money was developing for the church. And I think it also explains the motives why we went into the ministry. If the motive in the first place was to make money, not to serve the people of God, I believe that when a man of God, when a man or a woman is truly called of God, you know how to sacrifice. Because Jesus says, there's no greater love than to lay your life down for your brother and your sister. When you are truly called, you know how to sacrifice for the church, to give the church an opportunity. Yes, they'll look after you, but remember, you can't draw from a bank account you never invested. The church will never look after you if you've never looked after them. So in the ministry, yes, we preach the gospel, but we also need to work. And I believe when a minister can work and support, other men in the church can see which he preaches to us, but he also works. Like some of us, even though we run a sizable church here, but I do something on the side. I support, make sure that the projects of the church, we've got multi-million rand projects, just things on the side to make sure the church grows, the church develops, and the church working it's an ethic. It's how people live their business. And as I close on this question, somebody said, there are nationalities whose work ethic is tops. Look at the Chinese and look at some of the Indians. And somebody said God blesses them, not necessarily because they are Christians, but because God has blessed the work. He said, men will live from the brow of you live from the sweat of your brow, which means out of you sweating, you can eat. As long as human beings, whether they're Christian or non-Christians, as long as they honor that and they work hard, God honors that because it's a principle that God has designed, and they're prospering. Look at the Chinese. They're now threatening superpowers like America. And look at the Indian economy in India, the economy of India. Look at now the Bodland Range Rover, and they're buying bigger things and they're doing amazing things. And I'm watching the space. Why? Because they are believing in working hard. Unless we get off our sitting down and get to work, we will never make it. We'll never get to a place where we work. We still are concerned about, why me? I fought. Why not give me 10,000? Nobody's going to come and give you 10,000 rand. You need to give yourself 10,000 rand through your hard work. It's time for men to believe in their own hard work. If you don't get a job, give yourself a job.
Sengibala. Ngiyakuzwa mfundisi and kuyacaca ukuthi usikhuthaza ukuthi singene nakweza amabhizinisi angithi. So iquestion yami ithi njengomzalwane ngivumelekile yini mhlambe ukuthatha ibhizinisi mhlambe lokudayisa utshwala?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. Your Christian morals need to guide you, okay? And I want to tie it up with this question with the question you asked earlier. That said, How do you know this job is a bait? Okay, of course, we need to be guided by morals so that we don't do the jobs or do business that destroys the lives of people. So we need to stay clear on that. And I believe there are a lot of good businesses, clean businesses, and clean business ideas that we can have that can make us put it in this place where we can do business. But take for an example. There are a lot of we can do business of cleaning, we can do business of providing services, providing all kinds of services, cleaning services, doing washing, collecting washing and dropping washing, picking kids go to school. There's quite a lot of businesses where we can provide a service. One study survey on business and entrepreneurship, to be an entrepreneur, that has just been done. They said the services sector, providing a service, not creating a product, providing your service, driving someone, fixing something for somebody, collecting, dropping, cleaning, all the other things, has increased phenomenally. There's an exponential growth in providing services. So we can do clean businesses. Now, we should not, and it begins, in my opinion, it begins with the crowd and the group that we keep. As long as you stay with the good group of people and friends, they will advise you to make sure you do the right things. And I think it's in the friends you mix with where you get ideas of how people get wrong. That's what I've noticed. And that's how the Bible says, blessed is the man who doesn't walk according to the advice of the ungodly. We need to be godly in the advice. We need to do right and get into entrepreneurship. The scope is wide. The sky is the limit. We can do it. And I think if we can change our mindset around expecting somebody to give us something and starting to do something. You've got to start to do something. You need to have a mind, I can start and learn. Even if you fail, failure is part of it. But go for it and push yourself forward.
So Mfundisi, as a young man, I've noted that it's very easy for one to forget about their gifts, God-given talents. When there are a lot of voices around the communities and at home which celebrate one getting a job. I mean, after all, I'm just a generation away from a generation that celebrates positions, being an CEO, MD or whatnot, rather than celebrating someone who has established wealth through their gift. So then my question would be, Mfundisi, how can I develop my gift to such a point where I can be able to provide for my family?
It's a very good question. And let me just say that part of the question whether positions and gift feeds into other questions. Whether do you get educated to get a job, or you want to follow your talent to get it, to create jobs. It also feeds into that space of education route or non-education. It also feeds into a space of taking up a job in a corporate business and also starting small as an entrepreneur and scale up your business as a startup. So it's a whole discussion. Okay. I would say personally, and it also feeds into the discussion of innovation, to innovate an idea, start out an idea with a technical idea. And actually, as a matter of fact, they say in Africa today, the top businesses in Africa are linked to its financial technical businesses. The apps, the apps, kids in Nigeria are developing financial apps that are becoming an alternative to banking. And in Kenya, young kids are becoming rich by developing apps. They are using their gifts. They develop apps, and they may not have necessarily have the highest of education, but they're using their thinking, their ability, their gift to make sure that they create innovation. Innovation, it becomes a disruptive innovation. We call it disruptive. Anything that becomes disruptive innovation, it takes the market by storm, and it becomes successful, and it becomes scalable, it becomes bigger, and it becomes, and the startup and the people who start that, they become very wealthy. Look at Google, look at WhatsApp, look at Dropbox, look at all of those initiatives. Those are started by young guys who are in their 20s, and some of them don't even have university degrees. So there is a place where people can use their skills and their gifts to start up businesses and to scale up to using their skills and their talents. However, it will always be a good idea to tell people, go to school, earn a degree, come into a working environment. Now, the good thing about that is that the issue is, what do we promote first? Do we promote kids going to using their gifts and starting up an innovative technological idea? Or do we tell them to go to school, get a qualification, get employed? There's pros and cons. Some people feel the education part, they're getting a position, start in junior management, work your way up to the top, might take you 7 years or 10 years. It's longer. This one is shorter. But the good thing about this is that then when you come into a business environment, established business, you get to learn the business culture. You get to know how to manage money. You learn from the best. And therefore the room for more mistakes are small. But on this side, when you've got your gift, but your ability to manage your money, the ability to manage your life and human resource, you don't have that. Or that's all you do. You just have this ability to create apps. But when you've got to sell it and create business contracts, you get robbed, you don't know what to do. You make too many mistakes. So there's pros and cons. So I could never say I promote the one at the expense of the other. However, because the one of the skills, innovation, technical innovation, we have never had it, we have never seen it. Young people and startups and being scaled up and going to business schools and being taught and incubation, that's the word I'm looking for. Business incubation, being given funding, looking for funding. And the greatest thing is that with people who ideate, who have ideas, I've met a lot of young people say, Mfundisi, I've created this app. I can't show it to anybody. I want to create an IP with this app, but I don't have anybody to fund. So that's the problem. And when you're looking for investors to invest into your capital, that's why now you need to be wise what contracts you enter into. So I support both. I support going to school, starting out in a company, working in an institution, learning the ropes, learning to wake up early in the morning under a manager, being taught how to do it, learning from the best. But also, I also support young people going for their gifts, starting up and ideating and coming up with things that we've never thought about. There are young kids now in Africa designing cars, are designing new shoes, new sneakers, are designing new bags, are designing new masks during the time of COVID. Kids are designing everything. And the issue is that now the capabilities to be in business and to sell it properly, that's what sometimes is missing. So I would say those kids that are talented to develop technical solutions, they need to learn from those that are established. There needs to be a cross-pollination. We need to recognize each other. We need to recognize each other so that we can speak it into each other. I'm more along the side of having gone the route of having, go to school and, you qualify, you study, you work and you develop and you learn in an environment, you have a manager. I came from that school of thought, but I'm also recognizing potential and capability in the young people that we need to support, who have a talent, who have a gift, who know how to play around with computers, come up with good ideas.
Funis, I'm raised by a woman, right? I'm a product of women. And there's something that I've noticed, and I love them. That's one. Kuliso koko no nabo aunt. But if they were to tell me today that they love me, I'd be shocked. Like Natuga. And it's not that I'm putting them under the bridge, but I just want to highlight the dynamics as the people of color. Is everything okay? Should I come back and stay home? And all of those things. And now it becomes way harder if now there are women in the picture. And it becomes way more if now you put men in the scope, because it is hard sometimes to express ourselves. It is very difficult to do so. So if one thing that I would wanted to find out is that there's been now people who are coming out, and there are high numbers of men who have faced vicious cycles of abuse at an early age. But the problem, what differs when studies say is, when it comes to men, people tend to stop abusing them when they reach a certain age, because due to their physique, they feel that they might retaliate. And it is said that they will also become closer to their perpetrators. So the question that I wanted to know is that if you went through that, do you bury that away and be like, okay, it happened, it's fine, it's over. Let's just forget about that. Do you do that, or does it have the ability to come back and to taunt you? That's what I wanted to find out.
One of the things that I've had to accept, and as a pastor in my job, is to accept that men are abused as well, whether in marriages or whether when they're growing up, is to accept that men are abused. I'm not just talking about sodomy. I'm talking about as a cleric, as a preacher, as a man of God, man of the cloth. I have been ashamed to look at the Christian landscape internationally, how scandals of people who are supposed to be building up the young talent, building up the young people, how they have abused young people. And it has created enormous strain among young people. And it becomes, when you listen to these cases, how people have negotiated, men have negotiated their abuse through sodomy. It has been hard. And taking a lesson from that, 2-3 lessons, a lesson from that, I found out that when I look at these cases, 2 things come clear to me of this sodomy in the Christian perspective, in some of the denominations, is that men only speak up when they're older. They never spoke up when they were younger. So men take time to speak, or they may never speak. But what I've noticed is that those that were abused who never spoke or took time to speak, took many years to speak, their lives were never right up until the point they spoke. So what does that mean? It means, number one, we were never taught, number one, to appreciate affection as men. What mean affection? To be told that you are loved and accept, so that it helps you to psychologically be strong, because you're told, your mother told you, and your dad told you as a man, and all the other men around you who are looking after your life, who have an input in your life, when they told you they care about you and they love you, so that it arms you with psychological tools for you to be mentally strong, to survive the strongest of challenges that you have in life. Like, for example, working in a difficult environment, starting a degree and finishing a degree, and those things that require tough mental. So men, sometimes they never survive because they've never been told. So you're right. So the issue is, we need as men to begin to show affection. We need to see it not as taboo for us to tell your sister, your own blood sister, and say, "Ndaga, my sis, I love you very much. I love you." When you end up, you want to sign off with your message on email or your WhatsApp or your SMS to your sister, to your mom. "Hey, ma, I love you very much." I mean, what I do every time my mother comes to church, my mother is 92, turning 93 in July. In church, she sits behind me. Every time when I walk in, well, she's there before I walk in, I walk up to her in front of the congregation. Without fail, I kiss her on the cheek. I say, "Ma, I love you," because I've taught myself in pastoring to show an emotion to people. And I found out that even to young men, I give them a hug and say, "I love you, son. You're the best, son. You can do it." I found out where I show an emotion to men around, they become stronger. Clean emotion, godly emotion. And I think it's time for men, wherever you are, to start showing your daughter an emotion. Take her out and say, "Baby, let your 11-year daughter sit across you, 15-year, 20-year-old daughter, 30-year daughter sits across you, and you tell her, 'I love you, baby. That's just all I want to let you know. I love you.'" And not only say it, act it. Because the word love is heavily weighed towards actions. It's an act, it's a word of action. Show it. Open the door for them. Fetch them from school. Be there for them. Work for them and be with them. So as men, what has made us not to close up and not to show an emotion is because we never been told that showing an emotion is okay. And I think what we need to do as men is to start having discussions. What I've heard today, what has come out from these questions for me, is the need for us as churches to do business differently. Let's bring men together, not only to preach to them only, but to talk about practical things, how to show love, how to start a business. Let's go on the offensive side of being practical. Let's show them how to do it. Let's not just let them hear it. I think it's time for us, the men, to gather together. Let the men's club be stronger in the nation. Let the men come together. Let the men be stronger to do what they need to do. Women talk to one another all the time. Women share their pain. The reason why they survive the pain It's because they shared with a friend, shared with a sister, shared with the mother. And that is why they know how to navigate the pain. But as men, we bottle the things up, and that is why man ends up shooting another man, killing another man, committing suicide, doing acts of violence, grief. And you wonder when you look at a dead body, a body of a deceased person, and say, a woman has been killed by the boyfriend, by the husband. It's so bad. You can tell that there was so much anger behind this person. And why couldn't you locate the anger? My life changed 1 year, many years ago, over 10 years ago, when one special woman who used to come to our church, and she came to me and told me the story. She said, Mfundisi, I've spoken to my boyfriend. He doesn't want to work. I want to move on in life. Oh, well, that's what is right. But the guy killed her. And when I was told the news a week later that he had killed her, my heart sank. And I began to know that men are capable of a lot if we do not spend time to develop the men, to soften the men, to make the men talk. Let the men talk. Let's have the dialogue. Asakanen, and let's talk. Thank you very much for coming through to this segment. Oh my God, my heart is touched. It's full of love. And we'll catch us remember, this is a 2-part series. This is the first section of the segment. And we invite you to stay tuned for the next segment, where we're going to include other men to talk about other things. Let's keep on dialoguing. Let's keep on talking. We need to do this as much as we can. And of course, this is just part 1. Watch it on Thursday. We'll be online. And the second part is going to come. Other men are going to come in, and we're going to speak and share and dialogue about things that men need to do. Men, you are special if you've never been told. In Jesus' name.